Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cool glass of the observation window. The stars looked different here, millions of miles from Earth. She took a deep breath and tried to calm her racing heart. Tomorrow, humans would meet the Varath for the first time. Tomorrow, everything would change. The Convergence Station was enormous. It floated in neutral space, built by a dozen different alien species. The station's curved walls gleamed silver under the distant stars. Inside, the air smelled strange, recycled and metallic. Sarah had been here for 3 days, preparing for the peace talks. Her team of diplomats studied files and practiced speeches. But Sarah knew her job was different. She was a xenopsychologist. She studied how alien minds worked. The Varath were coming. Everyone was nervous about that. Sarah walked through the station's main corridor. Other diplomats rushed past her, carrying data pads and whispering to each other. Ambassador Williams, the team leader, looked exhausted. He had deep circles under his eyes. "Dr. Chen," he called out, "are you ready for tomorrow?" "As ready as I can be," Sarah said. "What do we know about their arrival time?" "They'll dock at dawn cycle, 6 hours from now." Williams rubbed his face. "I hope you can help us understand them. The reports say they're difficult." Sarah had read all the reports. The Varath Dominion controlled 40 star systems. They were warriors, fierce and proud. Their ships were fast and deadly. For years, they had avoided humans. They thought Earth's people were weak, too soft, too emotional. But resource disputes along the border had forced this meeting. Both sides needed peace, even if neither wanted to admit it. "I'll do my best," Sarah promised. 6 hours later, she stood in the docking bay with the rest of the human delegation. Her hands were sweating. She wiped them on her pants and tried to look professional. The Varath ship was black as midnight. It slid into the docking port without a sound. The airlock hissed open. Sarah held her breath. They came through like a storm, tall and powerful, covered in dark fur that ranged from black to deep gray. Their faces were like wolves, sharp teeth, bright eyes, pointed ears. But they walked upright on 2 legs. They wore armor made of strange metal that seemed to absorb light. Each one carried weapons on their belts. At the front walked High Alpha Krevnath. Sarah recognized him from the images. He was massive, almost 7 feet tall. His fur was silver with age, but his yellow eyes were sharp and calculating. Scars crossed his muzzle. He moved with absolute confidence. Beside him walked a smaller figure. A pup, Sarah realized. He barely reached his father's chest. His fur was darker, sleeker. He wore armor, too, but it was decorated with symbols Sarah didn't recognize. The young Varath stood perfectly still, his face showing nothing. Ambassador Williams stepped forward. "High Alpha Krevnath. Welcome to Convergence Station. We are honored humans." Krevnath's voice was deep and rough. He looked at Williams the way a wolf might look at a rabbit. "You called this meeting. We came. That is enough honor." Williams's smile faltered, but he recovered. "Of course. May I introduce our delegation?" He went down the line, naming each human. When he reached Sarah, she bowed her head slightly. "Dr. Sarah Chen. She studies how different species think and feel." Krevnath's eyes fixed on her. "Feel? Feelings are weakness. We do not need anyone to study our thoughts." "I'm here to help us understand each other," Sarah said carefully. "To build bridges." One of the Varath warriors behind Krevnath growled low in his throat. The High Alpha raised a clawed hand, and the sound stopped immediately. "We will see," Krevnath said. He looked at his son. "This is Zin, my heir. He learns by watching. He will attend all meetings." Sarah looked at the young Varath. Zin's eyes met hers for just a moment. There was something there, a flicker of curiosity, maybe. Then his face went blank again, as expressionless as stone. The first negotiation session was a disaster. The Varath sat on one side of the long table, The humans sat on the other. Between them was a gulf that seemed impossible to cross. Ambassador Williams talked about trade agreements and border security. Krevnath listened with obvious impatience. When Williams mentioned mutual respect and understanding, the High Alpha actually laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Respect is earned through strength," Krevnath said. "Your species talks and talks. You cry over small injuries. You write poems about feelings. This is why you are weak." Sarah watched Zin during all of this. The pup sat motionless next to his father, but his ears twitched sometimes, betraying his attention. When one of the human delegates spoke passionately about preventing war and saving lives, Sarah saw Zin's eyes widen slightly before he controlled his expression again. The meeting ended with nothing accomplished. The Varath left first, their footsteps heavy and deliberate. Williams slumped in his chair. "This is impossible," he muttered. "They don't respect anything we value." Sarah wasn't listening. She was thinking about Zin, about that flicker in his eyes when someone talked about saving lives, about how rigidly he held himself, as if afraid to move wrong. That evening, Sarah couldn't sleep. The station was quiet during night cycle. Most species needed rest, even if they didn't all sleep at the same time. Sarah pulled on her jacket and left her quarters. She needed to think. She found her way to the botanical gardens, a section of the station where earth plants grew under artificial light. The smell of green, growing things comforted her. She sat on a bench next to a small tree and closed her eyes. The negotiations were failing. The Varath thought humans were pathetic. The humans found the Varath brutal and impossible. How could she bridge that gap? How could she make them understand each other? Sarah opened her eyes and looked at the tree. It was small but strong. Its roots dug into the soil, invisible but vital. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe understanding happened in the roots, in the hidden places, not in the big, dramatic moments. She stood up and stretched. The gardens were empty. She walked through them slowly, touching leaves and smelling flowers. It reminded her of home, of Earth's forests and parks, of the humanity she was trying to represent. A sound made her stop. Was someone else here? Sarah listened carefully. There it was again, a faint noise from the far end of the gardens. She almost turned away, wanting to give whoever it was their privacy. But something about the sound troubled her. It sounded like crying, but trying very hard not to be heard. Sarah's heart clenched. Someone was in pain. Her instinct as a psychologist overrode everything else. She walked quietly toward the sound, careful not to startle whoever was there. The gardens connected to an observation deck through a small doorway. The sound was coming from there. Sarah stepped through and looked around. The observation deck was dark except for the starlight coming through the massive windows. Shadows filled the corners. "Hello?" she called softly. "Are you all right?" The crying stopped abruptly. Sarah heard rapid breathing. Someone trying desperately to be quiet. She walked forward slowly, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. There, behind a control panel in the corner, she saw a familiar shape. Dark fur, pointed ears, small size. Zin, the High Alpha's pup, was pressed into the shadows. His face was wet with tears. His whole body was shaking. And his eyes, when they met Sarah's, were filled with absolute terror. Sarah froze. She knew this moment was dangerous. One wrong move, and she could destroy whatever fragile piece existed between their species. But more than that, she could hurt this frightened child. Because that's what Zin was, despite his armor and training, a child who was crying alone in the dark. "It's okay," Sarah said softly. She didn't move closer. "I won't tell anyone." Zin's ears flattened against his head. His claws scraped against the metal floor. You must tell," he whispered. His voice cracked. "It is the law. Weakness must be reported." "Your law, not mine." Sarah slowly sat down on the floor, making herself smaller and less threatening. She was still several feet away from him. "And I don't think crying makes you weak." The pup stared at her like she had said something impossible. His mouth opened slightly, showing sharp young teeth. "You lie. Everyone knows tears are weakness. Fear is weakness. I am ruined." Fresh tears ran down his furred face. He scrubbed at them angrily with his paws, but they kept coming. Sarah's heart broke for him. "Why do you think you're ruined?" she asked gently. Zin was silent for a long time. Sarah waited. She had learned patience in her years of counseling. Sometimes silence was the only way to let someone gather the courage to speak. "The tempering," Zin finally said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I have been in the tempering for 3 years. Every day they test me. Pain, isolation, fear. They say it burns away the weakness so only strength remains." Sarah felt cold anger rise in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "What kind of tests?" Zin looked away. "Combat against older warriors. Days alone in empty rooms. Watching recordings of terrible things until they no longer make me feel anything. Electric shocks when I show emotion. Scent exercises where they release the smell of fear and punish me if I react." He took a shuddering breath. Today was the fear gas. They pump it into the room. It makes your heart race and your thoughts scatter. You feel like you are dying. "I lasted 16 minutes before I made a sound." 16 minutes is a long time," Sarah said. "It is not enough." Zin's voice rose. Then he clamped his mouth shut in panic. When no one came running, he continued quietly. "My father lasted 43 minutes when he was my age. The record is 71 minutes. I am the heir. I must be the strongest. But I am not. I am weak." His voice broke again. "I am so tired of being afraid." Sarah wanted to scoop him up and take him far away from this cruel training, but she couldn't. She had to work within his reality, not impose her own. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "About humans?" Zin looked at her warily, but nodded. "We cry too. Even our leaders, even our strongest warriors." Sarah smiled sadly. "In fact, some of our greatest leaders were people who cried often. But your father called you weak," Zin said. "In the meeting today. He said humans cry over small injuries." "He did say that." Sarah nodded. "And it's true. We do cry, but that's not why we're weak. Actually, I don't think we're weak at all." Zin's ears perked up slightly. You believe you are strong?" "I know we are. Just different." Sarah shifted to get more comfortable. "Do you know how humans became the dominant species on Earth?" The pup shook his head. "We weren't the fastest. We weren't the strongest. We didn't have claws or tough armor or venom. There were animals that could kill us easily." Sarah looked at the stars through the window. "But we had something else. We could work together. We could feel what others felt. When one human was hurt, others helped. When one was afraid, others stood with them. That empathy, that feeling, made us powerful. But feeling fear," Zin started. "Fear keeps you alive," Sarah interrupted gently. "Fear tells you when something is dangerous. It's information, not weakness. The question is what you do with that fear." Zin crept a little closer, curiosity overcoming his terror. "What do you mean?" "Well, imagine 2 warriors facing a deadly enemy." Sarah held up 2 fingers. "One feels no fear at all. He charges in without thinking and gets killed. The other feels fear. His heart pounds, his hands shake, but he uses that fear. He's more alert. He plans. He's careful. Which warrior survives?" "The second one," Zin admitted quietly. "Exactly. Fear isn't the problem. Pretending you don't feel it, that's the problem. That's what gets you killed." Sarah tilted her head. "Do you want to know a secret?" The pup nodded eagerly. The bravest humans I know are the ones who are afraid and do the right thing anyway. Astronauts who flew to the moon were terrified, but they went. Doctors who treat dangerous diseases are scared, but they help people. Parents who protect their children from threats feel fear, but they don't run. Sarah's voice was warm. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Zin. It's acting despite the fear. Zin was quiet, processing this. His tears had stopped. He wiped his face with the back of his paw. Your leaders admit they are afraid? The good ones do. Sarah smiled. I once read about a human general who led his soldiers into a terrible battle. Before they went, he told them, I'm scared too, but we're going to be scared together, and we're going to watch out for each other, and that's how we'll win. His soldiers loved him for that honesty. They fought harder because they knew he understood what they felt. In the Dominion, if a general said that, he would be killed for weakness. Zin's voice was small. I know. And I'm sorry. Sarah meant it. That must be so lonely. To never be allowed to show how you really feel. To always pretend to be something you're not. Zin's eyes filled with tears again, but different ones this time. It is lonely. So lonely. I watch my father and he is like stone. I watch the warriors and they are like iron. I cannot be like them. I try, but inside I am still afraid, still sad, still... He struggled for the word. Still yourself, Sarah finished. Yes. The pup looked at her with something like wonder. With you, right now, I can be myself, just for a moment. You can always be yourself with me, Sarah promised. I won't judge you, I won't report you. Sometimes we all need a safe place to feel our feelings. Zin moved closer still, until he was only an arm's length away. This close, Sarah could see how young he really was. His eyes were too big for his face. His armor didn't quite fit right. He was just a kid, carrying a burden that would crush most adults. Can you teach me? Zin asked hesitantly. How humans deal with fear? Sarah's heart swelled. Yes, I can teach you, but you have to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll be kind to yourself. This training you're going through, it's hurting you. You're not weak for struggling with it. You're strong for surviving it. Sarah's voice was fierce. And if you ever need to cry, or be afraid, or just talk, you can find me. Okay? Zin nodded solemnly. It felt like a pact, a promise between them. Now, Sarah said, let me teach you something useful. When you feel panic or fear overwhelming you, there's a technique that helps. She taught him the breathing exercise. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out, hold for 4. They practiced together in the darkness, their breaths synchronizing. Zin's shaking gradually stopped. Better? Sarah asked. Yes, Zin said, sounding amazed. My mind is clearer. You can do this any time. No one will know what you're doing. It'll be your secret tool. Sarah smiled at him. See? Humans might cry, but we also know how to handle our emotions. Suddenly, they both heard it. Footsteps. Heavy ones coming down the corridor toward the observation deck. Zin's eyes went wide with terror. Someone comes! Hide! Sarah whispered urgently. Different spot! Go! The pup scrambled away, vanishing behind some equipment near the far wall. Sarah stood up quickly and walked to the window, trying to look casual. Her heart pounded. The door opened. A massive silhouette filled the doorway. High Alpha Krevnath stepped onto the observation deck, alone. He didn't see Sarah at first. He walked to the exact spot where his son had been crying. He stopped there. In the starlight, Sarah saw him reach out one clawed hand and touch the wall. His hand trembled slightly. Then he noticed Sarah. His entire body went rigid. Human, he growled. What are you doing here? Sarah's mind raced. I couldn't sleep. I come here sometimes to think. Krevnath studied her with those sharp yellow eyes. This is far from your quarters. I like the quiet. Sarah met his gaze steadily, even though her palms were sweating. The High Alpha looked around the deck slowly. Sarah held her breath. Was he searching for Zin? Did he know his son had been here? Finally, Krevnath turned back to her. The stars looked different from every place, he said quietly. It wasn't what Sarah expected. They do, she agreed. For a moment, something flickered across the High Alpha's face. Something that looked almost like pain. Then it was gone, replaced by the usual stone mask. Go back to your quarters, human. These corridors are not safe at night. It was a dismissal. Sarah nodded and walked toward the door. As she passed Krevnath, she thought she heard him whisper something in his own language. It sounded almost like a name. It sounded like Zin. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Zin's tears and Krevnath's trembling hand. Something was happening beneath the surface, something important. The next morning, she watched the Varath delegation more carefully. She had training for this, reading body language, spotting hidden emotions. Before, she had only seen their strength and coldness. Now, she looked deeper. During the second negotiation session, a young Varath officer named Dreth presented a strategic proposal. Halfway through his speech, he made a small error in his data. Ambassador Williams pointed it out politely. For just a fraction of a second, Sarah saw Dreth's ears flatten. His pupils widened. Classic fear response. Then his face went blank. The mask slammed down. He corrected himself and continued as if nothing happened. Krevnath sat at the head of the table. He stared at Dreth with those piercing yellow eyes. After the meeting, Sarah watched Krevnath speak to the young officer. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw Dreth flinch, saw his tail tuck slightly. Then Krevnath dismissed him with a wave. But here was the interesting part. The punishment seemed harsh, but not as harsh as it should have been. Sarah had read the Varath codes. A public mistake during critical negotiations should have meant severe consequences. Instead, Krevnath had given Dreth a verbal reprimand and extra training duty. It was a small thing. Maybe no one else noticed. But Sarah did. That afternoon, she requested a private meeting with the High Alpha. Ambassador Williams thought she was crazy. He barely tolerates us in group sessions, Williams said. Why would he agree to meet you alone? Because I'm going to tell him I have information about Varath psychology that might help the negotiations, Sarah explained. His pride won't let him refuse. He'll want to know what a human thinks she knows about his people. Williams looked doubtful, but approved the request. To Sarah's surprise, Krevnath agreed. They met in a small conference room. No guards, no witnesses, just the two of them. Krevnath sat across from her, massive and intimidating. Speak, human. What do you think you know about the Varath? Sarah had prepared carefully for this. Hi, Alpha. I study how minds work across different species. I've been observing your delegation. Observing us like prey? His tone was dangerous. Observing you like students, Sarah corrected, trying to understand. And I've noticed something interesting. What? You're all excellent at hiding emotion, but hiding something doesn't make it disappear. Sarah pulled up her data pad. I brought some human military studies. May I show you? Krevnath's ear twitched. Curiosity, though he tried to hide it. Show me. Sarah displayed graphs and charts. These are human soldiers in combat. The ones who acknowledged their fear, who talked about stress with their teammates, who processed their emotions. They performed better. They survived longer. They made smarter decisions under pressure. Weak soldiers talking about their feelings, Krevnath growled. This proves my point. Does it? Sarah switched to another chart. These are the soldiers who suppressed everything, who tried to show no fear, no stress, no emotion. Look at the results. Higher rates of mistakes, slower reaction times, more deaths, and afterward, if they survived, many couldn't function at all. Their minds broke from the pressure. Krevnath leaned forward slightly. He was looking at the data now, really looking. Emotions are information, Sarah continued. Fear tells you something is dangerous. Stress tells you to rest. Sadness tells you something matters to you. If you ignore all that information, you're fighting blind. The Varath way has worked for thousands of years, Krevnath said, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. Has it? Sarah asked quietly. Or has it just survived? There's a difference. She pulled up more data. Human military leaders used to think like you. Soldiers had to be tough. No crying, no fear, no weakness. But we lost too many good people that way, so we changed. We taught soldiers that it's okay to be afraid. We gave them tools to handle stress. We let them talk about their struggles. And our military got stronger, not weaker. Krevnath was silent for a long time. His claws tapped against the table. Why do you tell me this? Because I think you already know it's true, Sarah said softly. I think you've seen what this system does to your people, and I think it hurts you to watch. The High Alpha's eyes flashed dangerously. You presume much, human. I do, Sarah agreed. But I'm right, aren't I? If I admitted such a thing, it would be weakness. I would lose my position, perhaps my life. Krevnath's voice was cold. We're alone. I won't tell anyone. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Sometimes people need someone to talk to, even leaders. Especially leaders. Something changed in Krevnath's expression. The mask cracked just for a moment. Sarah saw exhaustion underneath, pain, years and years of it. You want to know about the Varath? He said quietly. I will tell you. We are strong because we must be. Our homeworld was harsh. Predators everywhere. Only the strongest survived. So we made strength our highest value. We removed weakness from our bloodlines. We trained our children to be warriors from birth. And it worked, Sarah said. You conquered your world, built an empire. Yes. Krevnath looked down at his claws. But the cost? We do not speak of the cost. The younglings who do not survive the tempering. The warriors who break under the pressure and must be removed. The leaders who crack in private and then make terrible decisions. His voice dropped even lower. The fathers who watch their sons suffer and can do nothing. Sarah's throat tightened. Zin. Krevnath's head snapped up. You know nothing of my son. I know he's scared. I know the training is breaking him. I know you can see it happening. Sarah leaned forward. I know you wish you could help him, but don't know how without destroying everything you've built. The High Alpha stood abruptly. Sarah tensed, ready for violence, but Krevnath just walked to the window. His back was to her. His shoulders were rigid. I hear him sometimes at night, Krevnath said. His voice was rough. Crying in his room, trying to be silent, failing. Every time I hear it, I want to go to him, to comfort him as I did when he was a pup. But I cannot. If I show that weakness, others will know. They will challenge my leadership. They will say Zin is unfit to be heir. They will kill him to preserve our strength. Sarah stood slowly. What if there was another way? There is no other way. Krevnath spun to face her. His eyes were fierce, but Sarah also saw the shimmer of tears he refused to shed. This is our culture, our survival. I cannot change thousands of years because one human thinks we should talk about our feelings. Not one human, Sarah said. A whole species. A species that survived and thrived by doing exactly what you think is impossible. We're not asking you to be weak, High Alpha. We're offering to show you a different kind of strength. Krevnath stared at her. The silence stretched between them. "When I was Zin's age," he finally said, "I lasted 43 minutes in the fear gas. It was the record at the time. Everyone praised me, called me the strongest of my generation. But I had nightmares for years afterward. I still do sometimes. I wake up gasping, my heart's racing, and I must hide it, always hide it." "That sounds exhausting," Sarah said gently. "It is." Krevnath's voice was barely a whisper. "It is so very exhausting." "It doesn't have to be that way for Zin," Sarah said, "or for the next generation. Change is possible. Change would mean admitting our way was wrong, admitting weakness. Or," Sarah offered, "change would mean your people were strong enough to evolve, to learn, to become even better." She paused. "The strongest trees are the ones that bend in the wind. The ones that stand rigid eventually break." Krevnath looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked to the door. Sarah thought he was leaving. Instead, he locked it. He came back and sat down again. "Tell me more about your human military studies," he said. They talked for 3 hours. Sarah showed him everything she had. Research on trauma, on resilience, on the power of emotional support. Krevnath asked sharp, intelligent questions. He argued, he challenged, but he listened. Near the end, Sarah took a risk. "Hi, Alpha. Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask. I may not answer." "When you walked onto the observation deck last night, you touched the wall where someone had been. Your hand was shaking." Krevnath went very still. "You saw that." "I did." "And you have not told anyone?" "No. It's not my secret to tell." The High Alpha studied her face. "Why? You could use that information. Leverage it against me." "Because you're a father who loves his son," Sarah said simply. "I respect that more than I care about political advantage." Krevnath's expression softened just slightly. "Your species is strange, human. We prefer to think of ourselves as hopeful." As Sarah left the meeting, Krevnath called after her. "Dr. Chen, what you said about trees bending in the wind. We have a similar saying in the Dominion. Old warriors who taught me said, 'The blade that never bends will eventually shatter.'" "Sounds like wise warriors," Sarah said. "They were killed for saying such things aloud," Krevnath replied. "But I have never forgotten them." Sarah nodded slowly. Maybe it's time their wisdom was heard again. The High Alpha said nothing, but as Sarah walked away, she thought she saw him nod. Just once. Very slightly, but it was a start. The negotiations were making progress. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. Over the next 2 days, both sides actually talked instead of just posturing. Krevnath seemed different, though Sarah doubted anyone else noticed. He listened more, interrupted less. When a human diplomat suggested a compromise, he actually considered it instead of dismissing it immediately. Sarah saw Zin 3 more times in secret. Once in the gardens, twice in the observation deck. Each time, the pup seemed a little lighter, a little less crushed under the weight he carried. They practiced the breathing exercises. Sarah taught him other techniques too, ways to calm his mind, ways to think through his fears instead of drowning in them. "My trainer says I am improving," Zin told her during their last meeting. His tail had a slight wag to it. "He does not understand why. I still fail the tests sometimes, but I recover faster now. I can think through the fear." "That's wonderful, Zin," Sarah said warmly. "It is because of you," the pup said. "You gave me tools. My people only tell me to be strong. You showed me how." On the 5th day of negotiations, everything changed. The alarm started at mid-cycle, a harsh, blaring sound that echoed through every corridor of Convergence Station. Red lights flashed. Sarah jumped from her seat in the conference room. "What's happening?" Ambassador Williams shouted. A voice came over the station's communication system. "Security alert! Bomb threat detected! All personnel report to emergency stations. Do not panic. Repeat, do not panic." But panic was exactly what happened. Diplomats from a dozen species rushed into the corridors. Some headed for their ships. Others ran toward the escape pods. The Varath delegation stood immediately, hands on weapons. Krevnath's voice cut through the chaos. "All Varath, defensive formation. We hold this position." "The protocol is evacuation," Williams argued. "We need to get to the safe zones." "Fleeing from danger is cowardice," Krevnath growled. "We stay." "Staying where there might be a bomb is just stupid," Williams shot back. Sarah could see this spiraling out of control. "High Alpha Ambassador, please! Fighting each other helps no one. We need to—" The building shook, not from an explosion, but from something hitting the station's outer hull. The lights flickered. More alarms joined the first one. "Hull breach in Sector 7, the system announced. "Sealing emergency bulkheads." Sector 7. Sarah's mind raced. That was near the docking bays, near the ships, the corridor that connected to— "The gardens," she whispered, then louder. "The gardens are in Sector 7. So, Williams was pulling up evacuation routes on his data pad. So if someone went there for quiet during the chaos— Sarah's stomach dropped. She looked around the room frantically. "Where's Zin?" Krevnath's eyes went wide. He spun, counting his delegation. "He was here. Just a moment ago, I thought—" His voice was rising, the controls slipping. "Zin!" No answer. The High Alpha ran to the door. His warriors followed. Sarah ran too, ignoring Williams's protests. They sprinted through the corridors. Other beings rushed past them, going the opposite direction. Everyone was fleeing Sector 7. Everyone except them. They reached an emergency bulkhead. It was starting to close, the heavy metal door sliding down from the ceiling. Krevnath roared and caught it with his hands. His muscles strained. He held it up. "Go!" he commanded his warriors. They ducked under. Sarah went through. The moment she cleared it, Krevnath let go and rolled under himself. The door slammed shut behind them. They were sealed in Sector 7, the danger zone. "Zin!" Krevnath's roar echoed through the empty corridor. "Zin, answer me!" Nothing. They ran toward the gardens. The air tasted wrong, thin and metallic. The hull breach was venting atmosphere somewhere nearby. They had maybe minutes before this section became unbreathable. Sarah's lungs were burning. She wasn't built for sprinting like the Varath were, but she kept going. Zin was in danger. That pup who had cried in her arms, that frightened child who just wanted to be himself. They burst into the gardens. Plants swayed in the wrong direction, being pulled toward the breach. The observation deck door was open. Sarah ran through it. Zin was there. He was pressed against the far wall. His eyes were huge. His whole body was shaking, but he wasn't alone. 3 other beings were with him, 2 human diplomats and a Varath warrior. They must have come here to escape the crowd. Now they were trapped. The windows showed the problem. A jagged hole in the station's hull, sealed by an emergency force field that flickered ominously. If that field failed, they would all be sucked into space. "Zin!" Krevnath started toward his son. "Father!" The pup's voice was high with fear. "The corridor on the other side collapsed. We came this way, but the path is blocked. We tried to call for help, but communications are down and—" "It's all right," Krevnath interrupted. His voice was firm, but Sarah heard the tremor underneath. "We will get you out." One of the human diplomats, a young woman named Chen Lin, spoke up. "The maintenance tunnels. There's access through the floor panels. I saw the schematics when we arrived." "Show me," Krevnath commanded. But Chen Lin shook her head. "I saw the schematics. I didn't memorize them. I don't know which tunnel leads to safety. Some of them go toward the breach." Krevnath made a frustrated sound. His warriors checked the floor panels, but there were dozens of them. Picking the wrong one could trap them in a dead end or lead them right into the void. Sarah watched Zin. The pup was doing his breathing exercise. 4 in, hold, 4 out, hold. His shaking slowed slightly. His eyes were still terrified, but he was thinking, processing. Zin, Sarah said carefully, do you know the tunnels? The pup looked at her. I studied the station schematics for the tempering. We must know every path, every escape route. They test us on it. Hope flared in Sarah's chest. Can you remember which tunnel leads to safety? Zin's ears flattened. I do not know. I am afraid. When I am afraid, my thoughts scatter. I cannot... His breathing was getting faster. Panic was setting in. Krevnath stepped toward his son. For a moment, Sarah saw the mask slip, saw the father underneath the high alpha. Zin, look at me. The pup met his father's eyes. You are my son, my heir. You are stronger than you know. Krevnath's voice was fierce. Think. You can do this. But Zin was shaking his head. I'm not strong. I'm scared. I'm so scared, father. I cannot think. I cannot... Then be scared, Sarah said. Both Varath looked at her in shock. Be scared, Sarah repeated. She walked to Zin slowly. Feel the fear. Don't fight it. Just breathe through it like we practiced. The fear is information. Use it. I don't understand, Zin whimpered. Your fear is telling you this is dangerous. Good. That's correct information. Use it to focus. Sarah knelt down to his level. Remember what I told you? Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. Right now, people need you. Your knowledge, your memory. Can you help us? Even though you're scared? Zin stared at her. Then at his father, then at the trapped beings behind him. Sarah saw something shift in his eyes. A decision being made. Yes, Zin whispered. Then stronger. Yes, I can help. He closed his eyes. Did the breathing exercise. 4 in, hold, 4 out, hold once, twice, 3 times. When he opened his eyes again, they were still afraid. But they were also determined. The tunnel under the 3rd panel from the left, Zin said. His voice shook, but the words were clear. It leads to the maintenance hub in Sector 6, safe. Are you certain? Krevnath asked. Yes, father. Zin's tail was tucked, but his chin was up. I am afraid, but I am also certain. Krevnath stared at his son for a long moment. Sarah saw something pass between them, understanding maybe, or respect. Open the 3rd panel, Krevnath commanded his warriors. They pried it open. A dark tunnel descended below. It looked terrifyingly small and cramped, but it was a way out. Go, Krevnath ordered. Chen Lin first, then you, he pointed at the other human. Then Dreth, the Varath warrior. Move quickly. They descended one by one. Sarah went next. The tunnel was barely wide enough for her shoulders. She had to crawl on her stomach. Darkness pressed around her. But ahead, she could see the others moving. Behind her, she heard Krevnath say, Your turn's in. You should go first, father. You are the High Alpha, and you are my son. Go. I will follow. Sarah heard Zin enter the tunnel behind her, then the heavier sound of Krevnath. They crawled in silence, just the sound of breathing and scraping. Sarah's shoulders ached. Her hands were scraped raw, but she kept moving. After what felt like forever, but was probably only minutes, she saw light ahead. The tunnel opened into a maintenance hub. Chen Lin pulled herself out, then the other diplomat, then Dreth. Sarah tumbled out onto solid floor and gasped for breath. Zin came through next. Then Krevnath, squeezing his larger frame through the narrow space. As soon as the High Alpha cleared the tunnel, he pulled his son into his arms. Not a formal hold, a real embrace. You did well, Krevnath said quietly. You saved us all. Zin buried his face in his father's chest. He was shaking again, the adrenaline wearing off. I was so scared. I know. Krevnath held him tighter. So was I. Sarah looked away, giving them a moment of privacy, but her heart was full, because Zin had faced his fear. And Krevnath had admitted his. Both of them had been brave, both of them had been honest, and everyone was alive because of it. The bomb had been fake. A terrorist group opposed to peace had planted a fake device to disrupt the negotiations. The hull breach had been caused by security forces overreacting and damaging the station during their search. No one died, but the chaos had shown everyone something important. Fear was real, even for those who pretended not to feel it. The next day, the full delegations gathered for an emergency session. Everyone looked tired. The humans were shaken. The Varath were tense. Other species representatives whispered among themselves. The peace talks seemed ready to collapse. Sarah sat in her usual seat. She looked across the table at Zin. The pup sat beside his father, as always. But something was different. His posture was still formal, but not as rigid. His face showed calmness, not the blank mask. Ambassador Williams opened the meeting. After yesterday's events, we need to discuss security protocols and... I wish to speak, Krevnath interrupted. He stood. The entire room fell silent. What happened yesterday concerns me deeply. Of course it does, Williams said carefully. We're all concerned about safety. That is not what I mean. Krevnath's yellow eyes swept the room. I am concerned about my people's response to danger, about our traditions, about what we teach our young. He paused. I am concerned that we are wrong. Shocked silence. The Varath warriors behind Krevnath stiffened. One of them, a scarred veteran named Torvik, started to rise. High Alpha, surely you do not... Sit. Down! Krevnath's voice cracked like thunder. Torvik sat. The High Alpha continued. Yesterday we were trapped, in danger. And who saved us? Not our strength, not our weapons, not our traditions of fearlessness. He looked at his son. We were saved by a pup who admitted he was afraid, who used his fear to focus his mind, who chose to help others despite his terror. Zin's ears went up in surprise. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. For generations, Krevnath said, we Varath have believed that emotion is weakness, that fear must be hidden, that showing what we feel makes us vulnerable. But I have learned something from the humans, something that challenges everything I was taught. He turned to look at Sarah directly. Emotions are not weakness. They are information. Fear tells us when something is dangerous. Sadness tells us when something matters. Joy tells us what is worth protecting. His voice grew stronger. And admitting these feelings, sharing them with others, working through them, that is not weakness. That is wisdom. Torvik stood again. High Alpha, you speak heresy. The Dominion was built on strength, on removing weakness from our bloodlines. If we start accepting fear, accepting tears, we will become soft. We will be conquered. By whom? Krevnath challenged. Look at the humans. They cry. They admit fear. They talk about their feelings openly, and they have explored farther, built stronger alliances, created more technology than we have. Their weakness has made them powerful. Another Varath warrior, younger than Torvik, spoke up. His voice was hesitant. But High Alpha, if we show emotion, others will use it against us. Will they? Krevnath gestured to Sarah. Dr. Chen saw my son crying. She could have used that information to destroy his future, to embarrass me, to gain advantage in negotiations. Did she do any of those things? No, the young warrior admitted. She kept his secret. She helped him. She taught him techniques to manage his fear. And because of that teaching, because of that kindness, he was able to save lives. Krevnath's voice softened slightly. The humans did not use our vulnerability as a weapon. They used it as a bridge. Sarah saw movement from the Varath delegation. Dreth, the young officer who had made the mistake in the earlier session, was standing. "Hi, Alpha. May I speak?" Krevnath nodded. "I have served the Dominion for 12 years, Dreth said. His voice was shaking slightly. In that time, I have been terrified more times than I can count. In combat, during evaluations, during the tempering. Every time I hid my fear because showing it meant death." He took a breath. "Yesterday, in the tunnels, I was afraid we would die, but the human diplomat, Chen Lin, she held my hand. She said, 'It's okay to be scared. I'm scared too. We'll get through this together.' And somehow, that helped. More than any amount of warrior training helped. I felt less alone." Torvik made a disgusted sound. "This is exactly what I feared. We are becoming soft, weak." "Are we?" Krevnath walked around the table. He stopped in front of Torvik. "You are one of our finest warriors, decorated in 17 battles. You have survived things that killed others. Tell me, Torvik, in all those years of combat, were you ever afraid?" Torvik's jaw clenched. "Never." "You lie," Krevnath said flatly. "I was there at the Battle of Korvath. I saw you fight. I also saw your hands shaking before the attack. I saw the fear sent on you. But you fought anyway. That shaking, that fear, did it make you weaker? Or did it make you more careful, more alert, more determined to survive?" Torvik said nothing. His ears were flat against his head. "The fear made you stronger," Krevnath answered his own question. "But we have never been allowed to admit that. We have wasted energy hiding our emotions instead of using them. We have lost good warriors who broke under the pressure of pretending to be stone. We have damaged our young with training that breaks their spirits instead of strengthening them." The High Alpha looked around the room. "I am not saying we should become like humans. We are Varath. We are warriors. But perhaps we can learn from them. Perhaps we can be warriors who also understand our own hearts. Perhaps we can be strong enough to admit weakness, brave enough to show fear." He turned to Zin. "Stand up, my son." Zin stood. He looked small next to his father, but his tail was high. His eyes were clear. "This is my heir," Krevnath said to everyone assembled. "He has been through the tempering. He has been broken and rebuilt according to our traditions. And it has made him miserable, frightened, unable to reach his full potential." The High Alpha's voice grew gentle. "But yesterday, a human taught him something new. She taught him that being afraid does not make him weak. Acting despite fear makes him strong, and he proved it. He saved us all." Krevnath placed a massive hand on Zin's shoulder. "I am proud of my son, not because he hid his fear, but because he felt it and acted anyway. That is true courage." Zin's eyes filled with tears. This time, he didn't hide them. They ran down his furred face openly. And he smiled. The room erupted in whispers. But not all of them were negative. Some of the Varath warriors were nodding slowly, thinking, questioning years of tradition. Ambassador Williams found his voice. "High Alpha, are you saying you want to change Varath culture?" "I am saying I want to evolve it," Krevnath corrected. "The galaxy is changing. We must change with it or be left behind." He looked at Sarah. "I propose a cultural exchange. Varath warriors attend human programs on psychology and emotional management. Human diplomats attend Varath training in strategy and discipline. We learn from each other. We become stronger together." Sarah stood. Her heart was pounding. "The human delegation accepts. We would be honored to share knowledge with the Varath Dominion." Krevnath nodded. "Then we have the foundation of real peace, not just a treaty, a partnership." The negotiations continued for another week, but the tone was different now. Both sides talked openly. When disagreements arose, they worked through them instead of posturing. When someone was confused or frustrated, they said so instead of pretending. On the last day, Sarah found Zin in the gardens. He was looking at earth plants with curiosity. "They grow toward the light," he observed. "They do," Sarah agreed, "even when obstacles get in their way. They find a path." Zin looked at her with those big eyes. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. You changed my life." "You changed your own life," Sarah corrected gently. "You were brave enough to cry in front of a stranger. Brave enough to admit you were afraid. Brave enough to be yourself." "Will it be hard?" Zin asked. "In the Dominion? When we return?" "Probably," Sarah admitted. "Change is always hard. Some warriors will resist. Some will mock you. But others will be inspired. They'll see that there's another way." She smiled. "And you'll have your father's support. That's not nothing." "No," Zin agreed. "It is everything." That evening, as the human delegation prepared to leave Convergence Station, Krevnath approached Sarah privately. They stood in the observation deck where so much had changed. "I heard you," the High Alpha said quietly. "That first night, I heard you talking to my son. I heard you teach him about courage and fear. I stood outside the door and listened." Sarah's eyes widened. "You knew? All along?" "I knew, and I was grateful, but also angry at myself, ashamed that a stranger could give my son what I could not." Krevnath looked out at the stars. "You humans are strange creatures, soft and fragile, but you have something we Varath lost long ago. Compassion. The ability to see pain in others and want to ease it." "You have it too," Sarah said. "I saw it in you. The way you looked at Zin, the way your hand shook when you thought of him suffering. That's compassion." "Perhaps." Krevnath was quiet for a moment. "There is an old Varath saying, 'The blade that never bends will eventually shatter.' I told you that once. My teachers were killed for saying it, but I am High Alpha now. I can make sure their wisdom lives on." "I think they would be proud of you," Sarah said. "I hope so." Krevnath turned to face her. "Thank you, Dr. Sarah Chen. You discovered my son crying, and instead of exploiting his weakness, you taught him strength. You have given the Varath a great gift. You have given us permission to feel." Sarah smiled through her tears. "And you've given humanity a great gift too. You've shown us that even the fiercest warriors can choose to change. That's inspiring." As she walked back to the human ship, Sarah thought about everything that had happened. She had come to Convergence Station expecting traditional negotiations. Instead, she had witnessed something more profound. A cultural revolution born from one simple act, comforting a frightened child. Sometimes, she thought, the biggest changes start with the smallest kindnesses. A pup crying in the dark. A human who sat with him instead of judging him. 2 words whispered in compassion. Even leaders get scared. And from those words, a friendship between 2 species. A new understanding of strength. A better future. Sarah smiled as the ship pulled away from the station. Behind them, the Varath delegation prepared to return home. They would face resistance, they would struggle, but they would not be alone. Because now they knew, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's facing it together, and that truth Sarah believed would change the galaxy.